It was a bright and sunny Tuesday. Gus did the usual routine of brushing his teeth and walking to school. His parents were always working. Gus never had any time to eat anything. On the walk there, Gus saw one of his old friends. Ralph had been one of his oldest friends. They went to the same elementary and middle school. Ralph was always the most attractive and confident of the boys. Sadly, their friendship had come to an end when the two went to different high schools. It has been a long time. Surprised, Gus looked and saw Ralph finally talking to him after 7 months. "Hey Ralph, I don't really have the time to talk right now, but we can talk later," Gus said, now running to try to make his first period gym class in time. The time was 8:12 a.m., Gus had just barely made it into his gym class. There, he saw his crush. Cynthia was one of the most popular and attractive girls in the entire high school. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. Cynthia was one of the nicer freshmen, but she was immensely cruel to every boy who even dared to ask her out. Even Chad Timberton, the freshman prodigy quarterback of the varsity football team, got rejected. She was always concerned about her adopted neo-Nazi parents infringing on every part of her life. Although Gus hated almost every attendant at Freedom Miller High School, there were some exceptions. Cynthia rarely talked to Gus at all. However, she talked to Gus in a calm and peaceful manner. Another exception was Chad Timberton. Chad Timberton was always at least 3 years ahead of everyone else. He became the varsity quarterback at age 14. He was in pre-calculus when everybody else in his grade was struggling with algebra. The vast majority of the 9th graders acted like cocaine-addicted 7-year-olds. As a matter of fact, one of the most prominent cocaine dealers at the school, 19-year-old Wilfred Tucco, was caught. Chad was offered cocaine by his own teammates on the homecoming game to ensure their victory. He refused, and the Freedom Miller Eagles still dominated the Mug Johnson Raccoons 34-0. Gus had never spoken a single word to Chad. However, he had a legendary reputation for having one of the best minds in the entire school. Chad was inclusive and was always willing to help anyone in need. The time was now 9:03 a.m., while Gus was running laps around the school's rustic gym. An evil plan was about to come to fruition in downtown Banco Falls. In the abandoned Liberty Station on 21st Street, 30 men in business suits walked up with fully loaded automatic MG-42s. They got onto an old subway train which looked like it had been out of service since the 1980s. The men stuck hundreds of pounds of C4 all over the outside and inside of the decrepit train. One of the men, who seemed like the leader, got into the driver's seat. The man was lean and tall. The tall man began to start up the old train. Surprisingly, the train was still operational after all of these years. He then began to talk on the walkie-talkie. "I will tell you when we are under the Malco Insurance Building," he yelled into the device. "Roger that," said one of his crewmates. The crewmates began walking toward the train as if they were going to breach the Malco building with their guns and armor. The train was now going at 117 miles an hour. The engine could not take it anymore. "Just hold on for a little longer," said the man on the train. As it turned out, the train was able to make it to the stop. The leader began rapidly pulling on the brakes to ensure that it stopped at the right destination. Thousands of people were gathered at the Malco station, ready to head to work another day at the massive corporate offices in downtown Banco Falls. A subway train was already stopped. As the old car braked, it began to crash into the subway train that was getting passengers off. This disrupted everybody in the station. The leader of this terrorist group was shoved back as it crashed. Weakly, the man said, "Light it." As soon as he said that, the henchman pressed a button. This immediately triggered an explosion in the Malco station, killing 1,204 people instantly. The massive explosion also collapsed part of floors 1 to 4 of the Malco building. People were now stampeding over each other to try to escape using the one viable fire exit left. The henchmen saw the massive explosion and began to sprint with their heavy firepower. As soon as they made it to the station, it was filled with the dead bodies of white-collar workers. They climbed up the stairs and split up in the attempt to cover more ground as well as kill more people. They breached the Malco offices. It was essentially abandoned with the exception of hundreds of employees running out of the building. The gunmen began to fire, leveling entire crowds of people and killing them in a matter of seconds. The next office that they infiltrated was the AT&T building. This building was packed with people living their lives normally. For a lot of these people in the lobby, the last thing that they ever saw was their co-workers getting gunned to death. These terrorists were able to sweep through and kill hundreds of workers in a single building in a matter of minutes. Then came the fun part. Scores of police cars and attack helicopters were en route to the terrorists. These terrorists had played their fair share of GTA games in their lifetime. They knew how to handle a 5-star crime. "We have got some fucking company," yelled one of them in an optimistic tone. "Well, we always expected some resistance against Lenin's dream," said another one. The cops were now in the streets of downtown, ready to hold the line to ensure that these terrorists would not infiltrate the city hall. Their only goal was to ensure that Mayor Clark would stay safe. Mayor Clark sat patiently for his ride to pick him up. Suddenly, a black Cadillac Escalade arrived to pick him up. The driver was a young man who was not ready for the action downtown. He took a wrong turn, which directly led them to the violence. The terrorists easily saw the large SUV. "Looks like a spoiled brat is trying to escape," said one of the armed gunmen. "Don't worry, this bourgeoisie fellow will get the wrath of the proletariat," said another one cheerfully. The terrorists all began opening fire on the Cadillac, killing the driver. The car swerved into the Malco building, starting a fire in the V8 engine. Mayor Thomas Clark had barely escaped from the burning Escalade alive. Sadly, they saw him crawling out of the destroyed automobile. They started to play with Thomas. First, they shot all of his limbs. They let him crawl for a little bit longer when they began to start round 2. They shot Mayor Thomas Clark in the back of the head. 27 bullets entered his head. The mayor no longer had a brain or a skull left. His face was essentially gone. The terrorists began walking away from the dead body of Mayor Thomas Clark. Victorious over their political assassination, the cops began to start shooting more vigorously at these armed criminals. However, even their .50 caliber snipers couldn't handle the power of the German-made MG-42s. Even with every single cop deployed here, the terrorists were winning against them. Eventually, the remaining cops retreated in fear of losing their own lives. The terrorists had completed their mission. Their mission of killing the white-collar workers and proving to the mass populace that the proletariats can fight against evil. Gus learned what happened at 9 a.m. School was put on lockdown immediately. After the scene was declared safe, Gus and all the other students were evacuated from the school. When Gus returned home, he turned on the TV. He saw the headline "Terrorist Attack in Downtown, Estimated 4,000 Dead." Gus was furious to see what had just happened to his hometown. He checked his email and saw that school was cancelled for tomorrow, but just for tomorrow. The new mayor wanted to show the people that terrorism wasn't going to affect them. The reporter talked to Vice Mayor George Barrington, now the current mayor. He responded, "I think that what has just happened to the heart of the city is absolutely unacceptable. I feel bad for the families of the thousands of victims of this monstrous attack on our free market. Every single person in America will feel the consequences of Tuesday, April 4, 2023. What will you do about the state of the city now that you are mayor?" asked the reporter. "Well, to start, I am going to increase police spending and also pass gun control laws to ensure that something like this will never happen again." Gus sat there, blanked out on what had just happened. He then realized that he had to prove to the principal that he didn't cheat on the algebra test. Gus turned off the TV. The time was now 12:11 a.m. Although school was cancelled for tomorrow, Gus had eyes heavier than a horse. Gus Blue brushed his teeth and went to bed.